Hi there, this is Jim the Keys bartender coming to you from Key Largo. I'm just enthused of being here right now. My laptop is just taking a shit and I have to go through my cell phone, so I want to see how the recording goes, and I apologize to listeners who have a tough time hearing me right now. Of course, if you've been an avid listener to our show, you've been through the ups and downs of me dealing with the sound effects. What I wanted to bring is 2 days ago, I had the Netflix released this series of short films called Homemade. It's about 17 short films ranging no less than about 10 minutes. And they were brilliant. What it does is it's an Italian-Chilean work, but it's done internationally. So these short films are from the U.S., from the United Kingdom, from France, Chile. I'm trying to think of some of the other places, maybe Mexico. And they all take place during the quarantine and during the pandemic. And what I'm going to call this episode a seminal event. It's historical, not the Netflix short films itself, but the seminal event. If you looked at a definition of what seminal meant, it's a precursor, it's a beginning, it's meaning seed. It is derived from semen and seminal, emissions and all that stuff has to do with. But since we're a Keys bartender show, Florida Keys bartender, we did get explicit content, but this isn't that. Do you think that people, when they're going through history, realize that history is occurring or a big event is occurring? I'm thinking that when this thing started out in Wuhan and spread throughout the world, and it has spread around the world, that a lot of people didn't realize that it would be doing or taking such a forefront or place in 2020. And years from now, depending on what happens immediately after this, if there's nuclear war or an asteroid strike on the planet, or some climatic change, or the magnetic poles reversed, COVID-19 will be the seminal event for the 20s, which they're going to call the 20s. I mean, we thought it was going to be the Australian brush fires, where it seemed like all Australia was going to be that. And I'm sure that when there was like small occurrences right in 1939, 1940, when Hitler was starting his stuff, that people didn't realize that was going to be the biggest events of the 20th century, and that it was going to change everyone's lives. No one knows. It takes a rear view mirror to view history and the things that make it. And what I saw in the Netflix and in the short films was people coping with their own experiences during it. So if you get the opportunity and you don't have a problem with subtitle films, because some of them, the ones that aren't in English, are the most brilliant one. But there is one with Kristen Thomas, the woman from the Twilight series, who I was amazed by her acting in this. I was. I know short films. I've seen student films and things like that. And what I think is, when it comes to short films, people can pack an idea and don't have to go with a broader message or a story And what they're doing in short films is just unpacking one idea over it. There's so Kristen Thomas is dealing with insomnia during COVID-19 and being stuck inside, and she just does this amazing thing just with her face, for the expression she makes, and it's all close up. So I thought that was pretty good. And there's another one called The Last Call, and it's I think it's from Chile, and it's an older man calling up one of his former lovers, who's an older woman at the time, but significantly younger than he is. And he goes on it is a very, very heartfelt, it appears to be a heartfelt and torrid recounting of his feelings for the woman. And he's in it looks like an assisted living facility, a very nice assisted living facility, what it is, and he has a healthcare worker helping him do a Zoom call to his past lover, and he goes into at length how much he loves her, how much he wanted to stay with her, and things like that. And it takes a really nice turn, a really different turn. And it's not necessarily, this one's not about COVID-19, it's about people. And there's another one, it takes place in France, and it's a young teenage emigre boy, and he's doing his daily routine, schoolwork, a little his fitness activity, and then he goes about setting up his drone and sending his drone out to take a look at the landscape around him in the small city that he's in. And that was really, really telling. And then there's another American who he's by himself and he's doing his daily routines, and he starts seeing a break in his psyche, and he starts breaking apart into different people. And that I found that interesting. And then there's another one where the infection, and that one's by Maggie Gyllenhaal. This one by Maggie Gyllenhaal and her husband. COVID-19 not only affects people, but it's affecting the laws of nature, gravity in the solar system, and the magnetic forces protecting the planet and all those things. So it gets a little sci-fi, but he starts having a problem with his toaster because of all this gravity fluctuations. I thought that was, and then was a Scottish girl who's living with her family. And there's another story of a girl from a 5-year-old girl from Mexico City just caring for herself. A 4 or 5-year-old girl getting up, making breakfast for herself, and then doing all the things someone has to do to care for themselves. And they're just they're all experience how the quarantine and how people are affected, and it gives you a look at, no matter where you are in the world, that that's where we get to see the commonality of all this, how it's not just when you go and get upset about wearing a mask. And not one of these short films was someone having a problem putting on a mask. And there's one by Kate Blanchett, and I don't know if they're in New York or LA, but it's a woman, the director of the film, I think maybe. She gets on a bike, puts on her mask, and just goes for a bike ride through, I think it's LA, and it's narrated by Kate Blanchett, just showing you what it's like, empty streets, and things like that. It's very surreal if you recall what it was like if you were living in a town where they had the stay-at-home order. It was different, and everyone went through it. They may have experienced it differently, and everyone has their different, hence the short films. But that's the one thing about a seminal event like World War II, or let me pick something really big, 9/11. Everyone knows who was alive and was old enough to remember what it was like to see the news and watch the towers burn and come down, and then what it was like to see the airspace shut down, meaning no planes going over, and that would happen for a week or two, and how people were focused on this one thing. But with this COVID-19 and this each event, even though it didn't narrow it down, there is one thing that occurred, COVID-19. But the way governments deal with it is different, and the way people deal with it are different. And it's just amazing when you see it played out in these short films, how people's experiences, some of them, obviously, you have one that makes it into science fiction and things like that, and how people view themselves. So another one was this woman who's a famous, the British family, and she was a director of Bend It Like Beckham, and how she's a citizen of the United Kingdom, but they're of, I think, Indian or Pakistani origin, and they're definitely from near the subcontinent, and just their experiences as a family, how they deal with it. That's a phone call coming in. I'm going to decline that. I hope that doesn't come in through my podcast here. So I encourage all my listeners, and it's a great thing about this. I do have international listeners right now. If you have the opportunity, it's called Homemade, and it says it's season 1. I don't know if they're going to continue it. There'll probably be more short films. We've got a whole world to choose from. So these submissions were they were brilliant. They were just brilliant films. And there was one story. It was a collaboration over at least 6 different countries, where it's mainly on messaging. It's a smartphone, and it's a couple in a tiny flat or apartment in the United Kingdom, where a boyfriend and girlfriend start out where they've broken up, and he's relegated to the bedroom, she's relegated to the living room, and they're talking to each other's friends, and they're in the beginning they're talking about the other person, even what they're expecting that's going through, and they just show what happens during this, and it's only 10 minutes, so if you can invest that, it's pretty good. And that one's in English too. So I'm going to leave you with that on the Homemade. But just think about there's a lot of people. I think we reached a point in the history of the world where there's so many people, much like myself, where they have the tools to be able to document what's going on. And years from now, if we're able to preserve the records, if they're not destroyed in some catastrophe, future generations will know, I guess, millions of people's different perspective on that event. Unfortunately, when you think of history and things like that, we do have a lot of records of things that occurred in the last couple hundred years, especially since the development of the printing press. But prior to, let's say, 1,000 years, the written word was a rarity, and only a few percent really understood that. They really there were people, very few people were educated, few people were literate, and the writing and then the storage and preservation of writing was in itself an historical event. There was a huge library in Alexandria that burnt down that stored a lot of information. But the thing is, with the way the world is now, there was never really a time in history prior to, let's say, the 17 or 1800s when people received basic education. If you listen to a letter from someone during the Civil War, you realize how literate people were. And nowadays, almost everyone has access to that, a smartphone. And there are servers that store their information. They can do a video blog. They could do a recording, much like a podcast and things like that. But if you think during the Dark Ages, that's the 1300s, let's say, during the plague, we only have records of people that were wealthy and who were people in royal classes, upper class merchants that were literate enough to record their feelings and write things down. And then they had to be preserved someplace. And so we don't have a record of what regular people went through. And we just have several ideas of what went on that time. But now, from just the last couple hundred years, we're going to be able to, especially, just remember 9/11, that there were so many people being able to talk about their experience of what happened on 9/11. And even with that, with all these things, we used to make fun of, think about the people we used to make fun of when it comes to thunderstorms, our ancestors, what they thought a thunderstorm was, and the theology and mythology they created to explain these things. Now we have people that eschew the experts, and they come up with, and I did this on several episodes, again, everyone has a conspiracy theory. Everyone has a conspiracy theory about here we go. I gotta decline this. Man, my phone, I'm trying to do a podcast, and what do you know? Yes, I hear that. Thank you. It is so funny that the one time I'm not allowed to use my laptop, I use my phone, and then it's just kicking all off these phone calls coming in from these old numbers I have, old businesses I have. So we're talking about how it's ironic how people would make mythology about things they didn't know, and they just say, well, this is what I think. This obviously, if there's thunder going on, there's someone up there with great power who's what the Dutch said, they were bowling and stuff like that, but they were smart enough to realize that there wasn't people bowling, but thousands of years ago, someone could just say, well, listen, they're gods and they're having a fight, and you can't see it. Sometimes it reaches the ground, and they hear it. That's our explanation. And now we get conspiracy theorists about everything, and people just can't accept that this was something that occurs. There has to be a reason for something, and it has to be easily digested mentally by people. So it can't just be COVID-19. Just can't be something that happened because of the proximity of live stock in a wet market in Wuhan, China. There has to be, and there probably, there are germ warfare facilities around the world, but I think pretty much germ warfare, if you think about it for militaries and stuff like that, I think they might be mainly places for people to develop vaccines, because it is a bad deal to develop a bacterium or virus that was going to attack people, and then how would it could come back and boomerang and get you? And they always mutate and change. So why would you really even want to fuck around with that stuff? And then people say, well, that's the problem. They're fucking around with this stuff and it gets out of hand. Yeah, that happens. But, sometimes it happens naturally. And their suggestion that the plague in some of the places where the plague was thought to come from, it was actually naturally occurring anthrax. Things that would develop because of the conditions in the ground. And just like, things occur. The French Revolution, some people suggest it was caused, it was a particularly hot and wet early summer, and what happened in urban France was they used to do several firings of baking for their economy loaves of bread, where poor people can afford it. And what it wasn't that fine a flour, and they would just make these hard, coarse breads once a week, and this way people can buy them cheaply, and then you made better bread throughout the week. They were higher profit items, but they used to make a lot of this bread only several times a week, and then it would sit around for the rest of the week. And what happened is they're suggesting that a mold developed because of the humidity and the heat, and people may have had a naturally occurring psychedelic that aided, especially in the urban centers, the craze during the French Revolution. There was a lot of crazy stuff that went on there. Once again, that's another seminal event, the French Revolution. People didn't know, riots were breaking out in Paris. They were angry. And they didn't know at the time that they were going to be changing their society. People rarely know that something historical is going on, and it's going to be noted years from now on how the people behaved and how they dealt with it. So we have our choices like this. When we had these pandemic broke out. Now we're in the midst of it. It's coming up on, today is July 2nd. 2 days is going to be July 4th. Many places in the country, there are people that are hunkering down and wearing masks, and there's some people that are very angry that they're not allowed to go and do whatever they want. So with the spike in weather, people are suggesting, well, there's a lot of infection going on, but it changed. It's not a lot of people dying. I guess we're going to find out in the end. You can call it what you want, but time and this is an old saying. It's from the 1800s. Time is a great thickener of things, meaning in time, people will look back and they will analyze it, and it will have all these other data points they can put in, and they'll be able to say, well, this group of people handled this event better because they did this, and they were better able to recover because of this. And they're going to look back on, I chance this prediction, that they're going to look back on our handling of the pandemic and some of the people that are calling other people, saying if you feel sick, stay home, and you're just asking people to just put on a mask, just a mask, to restrict the free flow of particles. That's it. They're slowing it down a bit. That's all we have to do. And when two people wearing it, greatly reduces that. I understand that it's a change of routine. I understand it's inconvenient, and you want to go back to the way it was. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks you have to worry about that. You might get sick, or you may pass on something to someone who could be immune compromised, or you could pass it on to a woman who's pregnant, or who just given birth to preemie babies, and she wants to go and see her baby, but she can't. You come in contact with her. Let's say she has to work a job and stuff. Her kids or babies are sitting in the hospital. I just saw a story about this. And if you don't wear a mask and you're asymptomatic, you know what asymptomatic is. That means you could have it and not display the symptoms. It's not a hard concept to understand. So a lot of times wearing the mask is like, I care about you. Not, I need to show my makeup. I spend a lot of time on my makeup. Well, I'm a good looking person. I don't want to cover up. It's inconvenient. It chafes my face. Imagine that. If you're in an event, you're at an event and you just spread it around. How would you feel if you were able to have the concept or comprehend the concept that, let's say you were on the top of the Empire State Building and you had a box of darts, heavy metal darts, 20 of them, and you just tossed them or dropped them off the edge of the Empire State Building, knowing that if they found their mark, they could hit 20 separate people and cause serious injury or kill them. And yeah, chances are most of them will miss. But on a crowded day, you may hit one or two. You could kill somebody, may make someone seriously injured. Would you still do that? Is that something you're willing to risk? How would you feel at the end of the day if you did something like that? You just threw a bunch of things off the top of the Empire State Building and you caused 2 deaths, 4 injuries. Pretty shitty. That's the same thing as being asymptomatic. You don't know if you caught it from someone else. You don't know if you have it. Yes, I hear the people. If you're so afraid of catching it, stay home. Well, what if that person has to be out? That person has to be out because of their job in order to support their family, and you're just doing it willy-nilly, not covering yourself, and they get infected, and they go home and bring it home, and it's just a chain of events. We live in a community. Don't we care anymore? I mean, it used to be that people who didn't care would be treated as antisocial, psychopaths, psychopathic. That's what it is. When you do things and you don't have concerns for the ramifications of your actions. It's like throwing those people every so often to throw cinder blocks off of highway overpasses. That's willful attempt at destruction, pain, and suffering. But when let's say, instead of looking for the car and throwing a cinder block off, you just toss a cinder block over the overpass. That's what you're doing when you're not wearing a mask. Chances are you probably miss a car. But you might not. So treat the mask. I don't know how many different ways to do it. If you were driving down a highway and you had a load of, let's say, big metal reels of cable, thousands of pounds, and you would, if you were a trucker, you would take great pains to secure those, so they wouldn't come loose and come free and crush somebody. That's precaution. Chances are, a lot of times we take precaution and nothing ever comes of it. Doesn't mean we don't take precautions. Same thing with guns. Remember, never assume that a gun is unloaded. You don't point an unloaded gun. Every gun is loaded. You treat it like that. So wearing a mask is like Don't cough, because you don't know if you're not infected. You just got tested. Yeah, you got tested 3 days ago. What if you got infected after that? Just till it's over. Oh, it may not be over. Well, maybe you have to do it a little longer. How important is that? Is there anybody in your life that you're willing not to lose? Think of that person. Think of that person. Think of someone you care about. And if it's only caring about yourself, then good luck. For that empty existence you have. I have no idea how you go through life. And even then, I don't want to see you suffer. That's called empathy. I don't take enjoyment out of seeing people suffer. That's the difference between us, maybe. And if you're listening to this show, chances are you do care and you do wear a mask and you are considerate other people. But just take heed that we're going to be judged brutally by history. How we handle this, how different groups of people were treated during it, how different groups of people behaved during it. There was a story by Edgar Allan Poe called The Mask of the Red Death. And it takes place during the plague. And the plague is indiscriminate, but these wealthy people are just enjoying themselves, drinking and all this stuff. Oh, I hear there's a stirring of my daughter who's complaining. I don't know what she's complaining about, but she says stop. It is 20 after 11. She slept at least 12 hours. Okay. So I don't know what's going on here. So this is me caring. Hold on one moment, folks. I'll be right back with you. I'm just gonna pause this for a moment. No, I'm not gonna pause it. This is live. Hey Sky, I'm doing a live podcast. Could you be quiet for a sec? Okay, I think that's it. So during Nebraska, they're having a party, and there's one character there who is wearing a red mask. And it's just the point of the story is no matter how wealthy you are and how they try to seclude themselves and have this great party during this pandemic, and supposedly they were healthy, that it would find its way into this exclusive gathering. And there was nothing they could do about it. So, whether you care, and I think you do care, the big takeaway is July 4th coming around. We might be doing another show today. I don't know. We're in Key Largo. There's a lot of people coming down here. I am working most of the weekend. I think I'm doing a double on Saturday and Sunday. And we expect a lot of people down here. Even though the beaches are closed, a lot of the public boat ramps are closed, the bars are closed, people are still feeling the need. I guess they're going to go out in the water, they're going to be at the sandbar, they're going to do all sorts of things. And my feeling is that because of the way things are in Florida, that we're going to see next week and the week after, we're going to see growing numbers of infected. Because the people that are most eager to be out there and about right now are the people that aren't practicing safe distancing, and they will be judged. And if you get a chance, watch Homemade, the short films on Netflix. Rarely do I advertise for that, but I think it'll broaden your horizons and understanding on what people are going through. But maybe if you're the kind of person that does watch those things, you probably already have some empathy and understanding for other people and realize that they go through things that are similar to what you do, but experiencing it slightly differently. If you are listening, please become a subscriber of the show. Follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. I apologize for getting political, but I think people know my feelings right now, and if you don't like it, you're welcome not to listen. I just wish that we all could be kind and understanding and empathetic and thoughtful. Being thoughtful, God, there's nothing better than being thoughtful. But sometimes we're asking for a little much. But this is Jim the Keys Bartender. I'd like to thank you for listening, and we'll be back shortly. Take care.